You are, in a way, you're kind of confirming this idea that these Illuminati, these elite bloodlines, that they do have some kind of connection to a higher negative spiritual force or hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean they do have I mean many of them do have connection, but it doesn't mean it's higher. See, this is when you're low, anything can become high. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Like human beings have been debased. So, I mean, if they knew who they truly were, like much of this stuff is light work. I don't know if we could put it that way, but basically it's nothing for us to deal with these kind of life forms when they start becoming distorted. But if we're distorted ourselves, then it would have this appearance that whatever they're dealing with is so much more higher. But we haven't even actually seen higher yet because see, this stuff that they're dealing with, just so you understand, it comes actually more from the Persian lore and was carried into the U.S. generally through the connections that Shriners and Freemasons had made with many of the Arab countries. And in the Arab countries, there was literally a lot of magic going on, especially with the language and the calling forth of jinn, which were basically entities that roam throughout the desert, which were known as the genies. So these kind of life forms basically are from who knows what segments in time, maybe rather recent, maybe far back. It could be different identities. It's just the use of a disincarnate form, which means a form that doesn't have an actual physical body to do one's bidding. And so, of course, something like that can become a formidable opponent for someone who seeing is believing, because most people can't even see these life forms and them carrying on and doing things. So it's just basically what these organizations have done is they've enlisted some invisible forces that are not invisible to everyone, or not everyone is not, most people are not aware of them, but that doesn't go across the board. Many cultures are still aware that there are other life forms that exist. So their most powerful thing is basically mind control. It's storytelling. It's, the Pope and the Papists, they make paper. So money is their power. Talismans were, the beginning of really their power, because talismans are actually how many of these entities are called forth. And it's just basically what you're doing is you're concentrating an idea. It doesn't mean that this is necessarily a being sitting somewhere waiting for you to call it. What it is when you infuse all your power or your will inside of something, even if it's of nefarious intentions, you're going to begin to manifest something that can work on your behalf. And they call that an eidolon. So if you get hundreds of men utilizing a certain symbol or utilizing a certain name and driving an idea and a ritual and a power into that name, eventually that name becomes animate by itself, and it can be called upon to do certain things. And so when even these names are being constructed, they're put around certain things. Like if it's to fly, then there must be elements of flight around it. And then again, all you're seeing is you're seeing the process of a birthing, just like what you would see in a womb, but it's being done onto something. Do you see what I mean? It's like, see, again, until you know your power, none of this really makes sense. When you know your power, you know that basically if you sit there and you say something all night, something's going to happen. Like if you just believe something, like, and you got 5, 10 guys and they all believe in it and they just keep saying it and saying it and saying it, and they just drive themselves into a fury, maybe drink some alcohol. Eventually, whatever it is that you're trying to get accomplished, you're going to start seeing a form of it being accomplished, right? So this is actually what magic exists with. Think about Harry Potter and how you see some of these magicians. They're basically conjuring from their will. What they're creating, the entity itself, didn't really exist before they actually bought it within their will. So that power, which is talked about in most of the ancient texts, is actually being utilized now for certain organizations to create invisible forms, ideas that start to control other people, how they feel, what they believe, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I want to make it for most people as simple as possible to understand that. See, how we're starting to view this is that, again, that there's literally some creature sitting somewhere waiting to be summoned. And truthfully, what it is it's being summoned from the minds of the inhabitants of the planet. and it births itself right from there. As far as if it had life before we gave life to it, it's just like, it doesn't work like that. So our minds right now are constantly evolving, and we're creating things with our minds that other people know how to harness. So even when we start coming into this belief about these aliens and all that kind of stuff, now, of course, there are other life forms out there, but now we're starting to get specific. We're starting to show specific geometry that this alien's supposed to have. And stuff is fed into the system, and then next thing you know, they're harnessing another kind of life form with that kind of power that we've given it. And it's just such a foreign way to think about how things work, but it actually answers the deepest questions about how realities are actually created. And then even more importantly, how did you get here? You see, so when you start crunching those kind of questions like, well, how am I in the mix of all of this? Then you can start realizing more and more about this power that we have to begin to manifest things from scratch.